Back. Hey guys, welcome back. Welcome back to the Cliff's Edge. Now, we're not playing a podcast live stream. Thanks for being here. We've got some awesome guests today, or an awesome guest. I should watch my singular versus my plural. But David Schuster is joining us as always to co-host. We are here as always in the fair city of Cincinnati. The skies are bright. The radio CD is ready to go. And I see that my guest, Melissa Corrigan, is already here. So I don't even have to waste all of your time with the rant. And if you can hear the noise behind me, I apologize. I went and spoke to the folks there and said, hey, I know you're doing some construction type work in the hallway. Can you just not do the loudest stuff between 2 and 3? And their reaction was to do the loudest stuff between 2 and 3. So what are you going to do in life sometimes? This time, it ain't even a me issue. I'm not even screwing up the microphone. Maybe the microphone is going to work too well, so you're actually going to hear everything. But you know what? That's good, because Melissa Corrigan's coming in right now, and she's a smart person, so you're going to want to hear everything she has to say. Hey, Melissa, how are you?
Great. How are you?
I am doing well. I'm doing well. We'll get the full thing going when David gets here. Can you hear like what's going on behind me here or no?
I hear a few thumps and bumps, a little bit.
I mean, it's amazing. I specifically went out like 4 hours ahead of time to have this conversation and say, please, you can do this anytime, all day, just between 2 and 3. Please don't. And I was assured it would not happen between 2 and 3. And here we are. I'm trying very much not to lose my temper and to be a nice person. Yay! Think happy thoughts. How are you?
Great. How are you? I'm super excited to be here and have what I'm sure will be a titillating conversation.
Titillating at the very least. It could go so far into the ether. You could almost say explosive, or you could say super dynamic or superhero, or I'm not coming up with anything cool to say because I think that thing's distracting me. So I'm gonna focus in and not be distracted. Damn it. So what I wanted to talk to you about, obviously, is the little Hegseth Trump circle jerk that they forced all nonpartisan, by definition, flag officers to attend, because you, as a veteran and an outspoken one, are awesome. You're just the right person to speak about this. But I feel like I'd be doing everybody a disservice if I did not give your bio, which, if I were smart, I would have right in front of me. But I'm not that smart. So no, I'll have it in a second. I promise you. Or you could give it. How about that?
I could do that.
Yeah, you know what? It's going to sound cooler coming from you than it is from me. I mean, let's be honest here. Tell us about your badassery. I want to know what you've done. Come on.
Yes, I am Melissa Corrigan. I produce Counterstory Media. Our tagline is we exist to audit existing societal narratives by telling personal stories. So that's my main brand of what I do. I am a U.S. Navy veteran. I served from 2003 to 2008. I was lucky enough to be on board the great USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. That's still my second home away from home, as well as working at Com Station Nick Tamslant. And I was on the last crew of HC4, the Sea Stallions, before they were decommissioned.
That's like a whole lot of stuff I haven't done. So, you already are bringing a lot to the show. No, I mean, seriously, thank you for your service. That's pretty incredible. And, if Pete Hegseth had his way, you wouldn't have done any of that, I don't think.
Correct.
They would have probably found a nice desk job for you somewhere. And
yes.
maybe hung a cross above you, and I'm not sure. But oh, look, it's David Schuster who's here too. I didn't want to start to get into the serious topics until David got here, because David is, David is David. I mean, he's the Emmy winner here. I'm just some schmuck.
Hello, Melissa.
Hello, David.
How are you?
David.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
You made
your stuff. Amazing. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, we're gonna have a good time here. So, okay, David was, Emmy winning. I always say that because it makes him blush. Host at MSNBC, CNN in the past. Now he runs away from corporate media, which I truly respect about him. And Melissa was just telling us her background on the Dwight D. Eisenhower in the Navy. He sailed the 7 seas, I believe, and defended our country and did all sorts of things that Pete Hegseth would probably not have allowed her to do.
That's correct. Including think for myself.
I'm sorry?
Including thinking for myself.
That's right. And I don't think vote either, right? He wants the
Right.
19th Amendment gone. That was one of the bad ones. You know what I mean? Like the
Yes.
4th Amendment. That one sucked too. And the First Amendment, but that one, it just depended. It's only depends on your skin tone as to whether
Right.
that was a good amendment or not. And the second one, of course, was meant for anybody, including fetuses or feti, maybe, to carry guns. And so we get that all straight. In any case, so Melissa gave us her background in military, also a communicator. Let's go before we get into the Hegseth and Trump stuff from yesterday, which is repulsive in enough ways that we could talk about it forever. That when you talk about the communications you do through personal stories, because I'm a big believer in that. Like, we on the Democratic side are really great at taking the blood and personality out of everything and making it a machine and telling people, we raised your income by 2.67%. And, so personal stories are everything. And we forget that somehow that's how humans communicated for thousands of years before there was this thing called the TV. I know you guys don't know there was a time before that thing out there, but there was. I kid. This is a smart audience. So, what kind of personal stories? Like, give us an example of the kind of stuff you do.
Okay, it started because I am an adoptee of what I would consider a failed adoption. It was a private adoption in South Carolina in 1989. It did not go well during my childhood, and it summarily basically ended at 18. And I kept that stuff private for a long time. And then when I began speaking out about it and telling my story, writing my story, I ran into so many people who went through the same unfortunate experiences. And we started uncovering a giant web of evangelical adoptions that happened around the late 80s and early 90s that ultimately a lot of them proved to be abusive and not very successful adoptions. So my very first publication was called Adoptare, and we existed to only tell the stories of adoptees. We don't tell the stories of adopters or adoption agencies, only those who have experienced it themselves. And out of that, I began speaking with veterans. I met an adoptee who is a veteran, who is an excellent writer. His name is Roman Newell. And I began speaking with him about publishing his stuff. And so I began Served, which is a publication that only publishes the words of veterans. And if you've never worked with a Vietnam vet to craft his story for release into the world, that is a profound experience. A lot of Vietnam vets are at a point where they don't want to take that to the grave with them, and they are ready to tell their story. And out of these stories, I developed Counter Story Media, under which all of those publications fall under that umbrella. And so that's what I do. I tell the stories that society really doesn't want to hear, but really needs to hear.
Wow.
And how did you get into, to take it back even further, because I imagine the storytelling came after you had served in the military. What drew you to the military way back when?
9/11. Yeah, 9/11. I was 19 years old and kind of floating. I had decided to skip a semester of college. We all know how that goes. The semester that sort of drags into perpetuity, and kind of floating. And the day 9/11 happened, a friend of mine and I looked at each other and we said, "Is this our Pearl Harbor? I think this is our Pearl Harbor." And so we went and enlisted.
Wow.
And I could absolutely see. I mean, I sort of was a bit older at that point, I would guess, but I was thinking about actually getting involved in some fashion myself as someone who had been in sort of studied foreign policy and been involved in diplomatic activities. Let's say, I don't know how best to put all this crap, but point being is, I thought I think a lot of us had that reaction that day, and you actually went and did it, which is incredible and courageous. And what was it like? What was it? I mean, I have to believe still the atmosphere for being a woman in the Navy at that point in time was not, let's say, equal to that of your male counterparts. So what was that like?
I've written a lot of essays on this topic because I have a very sort of dual experience. I absolutely loved my time in the Navy. I loved serving my country. I loved the sea and being out on the sea and joining an age-old tradition of sailors. Really called to me and spoke to me. But on the ship, I did develop the nickname Ice Queen, and I learned to use my elbows a lot. I did find out a few years later that I was one of the first full waves of women on board that ship.
Oh,
So
wow.
these young men were truly learning how to handle themselves around female coworkers, and I had to help them out sometimes.
Do you want to tell us some of the ways you you want to tell us about some body parts, maybe some of them lost when you had to help them out in a truly aggressive fashion, or no?
It was mostly the elbow to the ribs and the guts when they got too close, but a few of them may have lost other body parts. You know, I was in a unique position because I was the webmaster and controlled the access to the internet, and I could see everyone's emails. And so if a guy was being particularly pestering, I could always offer to forward his salacious emails to his wife and what she did with those body parts. That's out of my
Good
hands.
for you. That's
Well,
outstanding.
that experience of being a woman in the Navy at that time sort of takes us, in a sense, full circle back to Pete Hegseth, because
Yes.
part of the speech that he delivered yesterday, and Donald Trump, I guess, spoke as well, was to try to take the Navy back to a time when women were not as welcome to be in combat roles, to a time when drill masters could put their hands on recruits, which is something I don't think we've done since 1980, or has been outlawed, or hasn't been part of the military for 45 years. What did you make of this sort of idea that Hegseth has this sort of a fantasy, or maybe a delusion, about what things were like way back when, in an age of political incorrectness, and how we need to somehow get back to that in the military? What'd you make of that?
Well, it echoes the entire administration's call back to some golden time. I find it truly interesting that for whatever reason, Pete Hegseth, who I think maybe is what I call a Top Gun kid and idolized that particular period, he kept hinging on 1990, and some of the actual directives that have come out point back to 1990 specifically. And if you were alive in 1990, tailhook should mean something to you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
tailhook was an enormous scandal that involved the sexual abuse and rape of 83 women and 7 men by some United States Navy and Marine Corps aviation officers at a hotel in Las Vegas. And for him to want to go back to that period of time it spoke volumes to me. His continued call for 1990, that to me as a woman is a very specific, it evokes a very specific emotion, and that is one of
I
overall
wonder if that's
threat
purposeful.
to
I don't mean
women.
to interrupt you, but I honestly, I mean, again, so many time we think with these guys, oh, they just made a dumb mistake, and we don't give them the full credit for being as evil as they are, and maybe trying to send a signal to others like them. And I wonder with the guy who likes to wear the Christian nationalist cross, and his own mom basically said he was a complete piece of shit,
Right.
and how he treated women, and had to settle a case with a woman, and
Yes.
the Fox News producer was the third wife, and he was cheating on the second wife with her, and had a baby. I mean, he's just a despicable,
Yeah, I
disgusting
mean, to your point,
individual.
he was credibly charged with rape, and
Yes.
offered gave a huge financial statement, according to his own lawyer, to sort of keep this sort of quiet. So it does feel like what everything Hegseth is doing now in terms of Pentagon military policy is his own projection that because he did some horrible things, because he was a drunk, because he was perhaps a rapist, he wants to sort of forgive people in the military who are like him. And
right.
that makes
Or
sense.
even
Just
promote
want
them.
to, it's not just a sort of, I was up late last night going through some of these directives, and the number one directive that he is pushing out to the military is to call back or crawl back adverse information reports on officers. So you get an adverse information report placed in your record when there are substantiated claims that come from an administrative investigation. That's not hearsay. That is a full-on investigation, and at the end of that investigation, if they find credible evidence of an adverse incident, then that goes in your record, and he wants those gone. He wants a 10-year time limit placed on those. Part of that, I have to wonder, is not his own behavior in his military career. He wants that wiped out of his record.
I think it probably has a lot to do with that, right? What's the is there a civilian statute of limitations and some of this stuff too? Maybe he's calculating. He's like, let's see, 10 years. I mean, it's again, it gets to a point where these people were so obviously all chosen because they're horrific people. Besides the fact that they're completely incompetent, and I think that the incompetence is probably something that Trump's searching for too, because then they can't actually, if they were to decide to even stand up against him, they couldn't do it in any kind of a way. But I mean, at some point you're looking at people shooting puppies in the face and people charged credibly with rape and people, who participated in the January 6th insurrection. Allegedly, that would be Kash Patel, who for some reason Merrick Garland never decided to prosecute. Somebody who the Supreme Court did not grant immunity to, and why I still hold that against Merrick Garland. But we'll move on. And you just see one just horrific person after another, and you kind of feel like, well, they're there to serve a purpose, right? They're not just there because it's like, well, I don't care about standards anymore. It's quite like, I'm going to throw this in your face. I want the guy who was charged with rape and paid his way out of it.
Right.
That's and that, and then I read the other part, of course, about, we need to go back to some of the hazing, and of course, all I could think of, you're goddamn right, I did. All I can think of was the Code Red moment.
Yeah.
And it'd be like, he was sitting there rooting for Jack in that movie. The rest of us were sitting there watching it like, wow, my God, they beat on a kid and the kid died. Sorry if I'm ruining a movie for all of you 30 years later, but and the kid died. And Hegseth was the guy, like, he deserved it. Damn right.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what he wants. He wants to bring that shit back. Like, incredible.
It's so, I don't know. I mean, we do know this goes to this white supremacist, like, patriarchal idea of what strength is, and this idea of what leadership is, that ultimately it's all just a front. These are very weak men trying to strong arm their way into getting an essentially all white. I mean, these directives that are coming out, he wants an all white male fighting force, and it blows my mind because the phrase diversity is strength. And honestly, that's a part of his speech that made me the angriest at the very end, when he flipped that and said diversity is not strength. Like, how dare you? That's the most absurd conclusion that you can possibly draw after witnessing the growth of our military over the last 40 years.
Yeah, I mean, without African Americans, without Latinos, without women, there is no military today, right?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, we had Commander Bobby Jones on here a week ago on the one that we do on Substack on Thursdays, and I think he was saying that. Didn't you say, David? I think he's like the majority. Like, you're losing a majority. I mean, which would make sense again especially if you're including women. Like, you're losing a majority of your soldiers. So what force is it that they think we're just going to fight wars via AI and drones, I guess? I mean, what is it that they think we're going to fight with?
He wants everybody to be a big buff G.I. Joe type, because his mind mentally is still stuck in that 1990 period, or even earlier. Even by 1990, we recognize the importance of technical skills in the military. There's some of my Army friends have this saying: for every one infantryman, there is 99 support staff that goes into getting that infantryman where he needs to be and covered. And all of the rest of that, those other 99, are technical and support jobs. So by focusing so much on this GI Joe image, this Rambo image, that we all have to look a certain way, it really undermines and is going to absolutely weaken our military. We should be focusing more heavily on the technical skills that we are going to need when you have drone warfare, when you have entire warfare happening on the dark web. That's the skills that you need in our military, and he is going to eliminate those, and he is going to weaken our military substantially.
And I got to believe that the generals who were there and the admirals and the 4-stars and 5-stars, they recognize that. And never mind, Pete Hegseth, what do you make of Donald Trump using this speech to essentially deliver like a political speech, but also going off on his usual bizarre rambling tangents at one point about complaining about stationery and paper not being thick enough? I mean, what must have been going through the minds of these military leaders who, some of them came from 8,000 miles away and just had to sit there and listen to this?
Well, I will say I was up late into the night last night comforting a lot of my followers who were spazzing out. There were a lot of people on the left, civilians that have never had experience in the military, or I guess had any family members in the military, that hoped they were hoping for some bold action on the part of the generals and admirals, for them to get up and arrest the man or say something or speak out. And that is not what we want. What we wanted is exactly what happened, and that was pin drop silence in that room. They gave him absolutely nothing aside from the perfunctory, polite, very brief 10 seconds of applause. Pete got nothing. There was not a sound in the room other than the color guard when he concluded his speech. So that was a big nothing burger.
And they said something. He said something about it. It was so uncomfortable. It's like, wow, I'm not used to it being this quiet, or something like Trump.
Right. He openly encouraged them to clap, cheer, loosen up. And they just stared at him. And I was like, yes, that's exactly what I wanted to see. I left, at the end of that, I was comforted because I saw military leaders behaving in exactly the way that they are trained and supposed to behave. They were apolitical, nonpartisan. And I took from that a message from those leaders to the American people that we, each of us, is here to serve you, each of you, and we don't care what party you're in.
Yep. I mean, look, you don't have to agree with every decision various military leaders have made at times to understand the sort of the importance of honor as a concept, which has been lost in a lot of American society. And I would argue there's goods to it, but there's also bads to it. It can be a way, an honor society can lead to violence too. I mean, I don't know. I'd argue there's good and bad, but some of these ones that Trump is going after, quite clearly they're serving. They have this concept of honor, and it's so foreign to him, right? Most of us are probably somewhere in the middle. Aren't where the generals are, but to Trump, to do anything because it's the honorable thing to do anything because it's the right thing to do. The sort of question to John Kelly about these these suckers and losers. Why did they do it? There was nothing in it for them. I think it's probably one of the most honest things Donald Trump has ever actually said. Maybe the only honest thing he's ever said. He can't fathom that anybody would do anything for anybody else.
You could see on his face in that room, he was bewildered by the lack of response. He surrounded himself with such an echo chamber of lackeys that applaud everything he does. He called them stupid to their face and said, smart people don't like me. And they laughed and clapped. I mean, it's literally a joke at this point. So for him to be in a room of people that did not concede to him in that way was extraordinarily powerful.
I also wondered, not to get too deep into sort of the psychoanalysis of Donald Trump, but the whole setup of him in front of the way the flag was set up was reminiscent of the movie Patton, which apparently Donald Trump loved and thought that, and so maybe he thought of himself as General Patton and was going to be sort of received that way because he had all the trappings of the same sort of stagecraft. I mean,
yeah, Draft Dodger isn't going to get that same reception.
Right. He's not the guy that Remember that movie? Climbs on top of the truck with a handgun to shoot at a plane going by, trying to bomb them. Like George C. Scott, he's the guy that's hiding under the truck, maybe digging another hole to hide under that.
Exactly.
And that he even, I mean, again, I think you couldn't be more right, David. Like the projection there is just pathetic. And they fall for it. I mean, not
And
they,
then
not
you
the,
could
not the people in
also
the room.
look at the dichotomy between those two leaders. One is a pure coward and draft dodger, and the other wants our force to be essentially a mercenary force that operates in total lawlessness. He wants to be like a Rambo type. So how the two of them have come together is to come up with this agenda is totally beyond me.
I suppose, again, he had to find somebody that ridiculous. I mean, because there's no other. I mean, why? Who was making this joke? Where was like, he didn't even go for an A-lister on Fox. He went for a B-lister who was like a
Yeah.
weekend host. Like, come on, Hannity wasn't available. Like, so I mean, it's like when you're reaching into the B-list of weekend anchors for Fox and Friends, quite clearly you have a very specific agenda that you're quite sure this individual is going to uphold.
Right.
And when you have that kind of agenda, when you have a Pete Hegseth, well, let's explain. I mean, is it possible, given the huge layers of bureaucracy that do exist in the military, is it possible that for all of the stuff that Pete Hegseth wants to do in terms of turning back the clock, that when it gets down to sort of the platoon level, that there's enough sort of interference up and down the chain of command that it's hard for Hegseth's sort of vision to become realized at that point?
Oh, these all 10 of these directives are going to be run through multiple layers of constitutional attorneys and legal challenges. Absolutely. When there's people right now that look at the National Guard on the street and they're saying to the National Guardsman, this 19-year-old kid from Iowa or something, hey, you should walk away. You should not follow orders. And it's not quite that simple. That young man cannot typically make that call unless, his officer was to come up to him and tell him to, shoot at a civilian. He could refuse that charge. But what you have is levels and levels and layers. There's about 35 levels between the SecDev all the way down to your lowest infantryman, sailor, Marine, airman. And between those 35 steps, there are a lot of officers who are not going to throw away their career and potentially their freedom over following an unlawful order. So even if it's out of self-preservation for their own career, they're going to stop it before it trickles down. So if you imagine a filtering system where you have a big wire all the way down to a very fine filter, these are going to get filtered down through a lot of levels before they hit the guys on the ground.
Right. And I mean, what I noticed along those very lines is he issued a threat. And I didn't see a lot of people cover it in the media when he said, at some point where he was telling them that they were going to be patrolling cities or doing whatever that makes no sense for military to do. Obviously, I guess he'll have them picking up garbage like in DC, because that's a great dignified image for our soldiers. But what he said to them essentially, I'm trying to get the wording correct, but he said, go ahead and if you don't like it, just go ahead and walk out of the room. He's like, your career probably won't do so well though, or something like that. Like he threatened their careers if they don't back him up.
Yes.
So I mean, he's trying to play that game of, well, you think if you commit an illegal act, you're going to lose your career, but if you don't listen to me, you're going to lose your career. And we're going to have to, if he does that with these, and he already has obviously fired certain military around him, high-ranking military,
and the sheer amount of women, high-ranking women that.
I think
not only fired, but humiliated, like the Coast Guard commandant being forced to be evicted from her home in a matter of hours. It wasn't enough to just strip her of her position. He had to humiliate her.
It never is enough for him, unless he's just, he has to do that extra viciousness, the cruelty, it's that is so consistent with him. It makes you wonder. I mean, if we do get to having some kind of truth and reconciliation committee, which I don't believe after this, if there's an after this, as we all hope, that we can move forward without, because then all of these things that he's normalized become ingrained in our culture. And I don't think a democracy can exist. I mean, there needs to be, an accounting of all of this stuff. And I think I would hope then that some of the military folks who did the right thing and lost their careers for it would be able to come back if that's what they would choose to do. But obviously we're a long way from that, sadly.
Right. I think we're going to,
Excuse
I told
me.
everyone yesterday, it's like a three-pronged stool. Their speeches were two of those. We kind of knew what Pete was going to say. We knew what Trump was going to say. We knew they were going to say things that were outlandish and inflammatory and designed to stoke fear and unrest. Donald Trump is day by day drafting and producing a reality television show. This was just another performance for him where he wanted, like the small sound bites you get out of reality television, he wanted to drop those small sound bites like we're going to train in US cities to stoke fear, to fill the headlines the next morning. I learned in the military how to kind of ignore men like both of them, to take what they say very lightly and focus on the reality, focus on the paperwork, focus on the facts. And so the third prong of that is what's going to happen, what happened after that. So when the live streaming stopped after those speeches, that's what I want to know. Did those generals just get on their plane and fly back to their command? If so,
Yeah.
this was just a big nothing burger. It was a photo op. That's it. Or were there further conversations with those national leaders where they are being grilled, where they are being even interrogated in terms of loyalty? Until we know what came out of that, I'm just going to assume this is another reality television, psyop essentially. And we're going to see these 10 directives get pushed out. They got pushed out last night, and we're going to see them go through not only the U.S. federal courts, they're going to go through military courts.
Yeah. I mean, with all of this, my concern always is what conversations they may be having with a few like-minded among admirals, generals, among any flag officers, right? I believe, we've seen it, right? We've even seen ones again who a lot of people here, including me, wouldn't agree with on everything. John Kelly, who I would disagree with on a whole lot of things, but stood up to Donald Trump, right? I'm not thinking of his name right now, but the former head of the Joint Chiefs, who exposed a number of things. The one that had to talk to China and tell them to calm down. That no, they didn't need to get their nuclear weapons ready. Who am I looking for? Anyone? Milley is who I'm looking for. Milley. And again, he's another one I wouldn't agree with on everything, but
Right.
These people honorably stood up to Trump. I have to believe there's a few, sadly, who think like Trump and Hegseth, and so therefore that's what my concern is what they're talking about. David and I have, David wrote a terrific piece about essentially what we're doing in Venezuela, which at this point is murder.
Right.
There's been no proof shown that these are anything. We have a friend, Jonathan Larson, who writes a great Substack, and he wrote a piece where he kind of said that there's some evidence that there were drugs on some of these boats, but that's, I think, as far as we've gotten so far. That there's no
Right.
complete evidence there was on all of them. So, we're killing people in international waters, and
Right.
it
And
feels
I also saw people wanting to blame the pilot who actually completed that mission. And again, if you haven't been in the military, then it may not be so apparent, but the fighter pilot is not charged with completing that investigation. He is charged to follow that order. And if all evidence that was provided to them or made available to them indicated that there were drugs on that boat, he may have believed that he was just following an order,
was acting in the
but
right.
it's
Sure.
not right. It's just not in his power to investigate every order that
Well, of
comes down. And in
course.
fact, because of the different classification levels, there's very little information that may flow down.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, there's a commander who you'd think would, has sort of a bigger picture. And I guess the question that a lot of us have is, how aware are those commanders, the people who have a larger picture of the operation and what they're being asked to do? How aware are they of the fact that the Trump administration has not sought a declaration of war from Congress, has not gotten congressional involvement to declare these people enemy combatants, or to, if you're going to classify them as a law enforcement operation, well, then don't they get due process? I mean, those are the questions that I would imagine, commanders who take a sort of step back, it must be concerning to them.
Right. And we can only assume that if Trump lies with every breath to us, the American public, that those lies probably do flow into that communication as well. And if you're a commander out on a ship, you have limited access to comms. What you are getting is, even if it's not true, it is satisfactory to you to believe that that's a lawful order and proceed from there. So there's going to be an issue also as we go forward with culpability, and where exactly will that culpability lie if the evidence that backs those orders that's given to those officers is proved to be false. So if you're passing down false information to get the action, I don't believe that commander is going to be held responsible.
Well,
Melissa, what do you make of?
I mean, if they're given false information and they think they're acting on real information, I mean, we have to they're human beings. In any case, go ahead, David. I'm sorry.
I was going to say on that point, Melissa, what do you make of the fact that Congress seems to sort of just be taking a step back, not involved? I mean, you would, under normal circumstances, you would think that members of Congress, they would want information presented in the SCIF and Capitol Hill hearings and classified briefings and all that sort of thing to better understand what an administration is doing. And sometimes that guidance from Congress, that oversight, can be helpful to the military. What do you make of the fact that Congress is just folding their arms and just
can I say
really
quickly, David, in Mike Johnson's defense, from what I read, he's allegedly very busy on Grindr. So
That's
you do
true.
have to at least
extracurricular activities.
Right.
I mean, somebody can only balance so many areas of their life. So I want to at least, give a little bit of understanding, like a little leeway to Mike Johnson. Grindr can really pull you in and can keep you busy. Allegedly. I mean,
pull you in part of the fun.
I think what we're seeing come to roost is the idea. What we're witnessing is politicians finally having to govern. And that is something that for many of them, they've never actually done. So the issue that we're seeing, and on top of that, Steve Bannon told us they're going to flood the zone. And that's what they're doing. They're flooding the zone with every conceivable topic, issue, avenue that they possibly can to overwhelm not only the American people, but our elected representatives, who many of whom admit they don't even read entire bills before they vote on them. So our politicians, career politicians, are being forced to govern, and now we are learning which of those politicians don't actually know how to govern.
Well, I mean, there's a whole party of them that doesn't, and then
That's true.
There's a second party that has some in it that also don't know how to govern. But when you start off
but
with,
I think one party has an
99.5
idea of how to govern, and it's control.
Say that again. I'm sorry.
There is one party that has an idea how to govern, but that is governing through control.
Oh, well, yeah, through fear and threats and all that kind of stuff. I don't know if I would call that governing as much as, I mean, it's all up to what you want to call it. I call it sort of moving from one chaotic event to the next, because there's never any actual long-term planning. I mean, to me, what this has all felt like, I mean, you said reality TV, which isn't far off, but look, we've dealt with politicized administrations. I mean, honestly, during my entire life, I think virtually every Republican administration has politicized in a pretty serious way. Intelligence, war. But what I think is different from Iran-Contra or Iraq-Gate, if you want to call it that, which people called it back then, with George H.W. Bush's support for Saddam Hussein, right up until the moment that he didn't, and the myriad issues with the second invasion of Iraq, which I think was one of the worst and more horrific mistakes that we've made in the history of the United States. That it's not to say these aren't bad things, but they were a politicized part of administrations that had goals and agendas overall. Again, most of which I would say, as you move on from Republican president to Republican president, got worse and worse and were less and less tethered to reality and more to ideology, theology, whatever the hell it was.
Right.
But I don't think we've ever had an administration before that has been one big, to put it your way, reality show, one big farce. I mean, when it comes to the theory of governing, look, George W. Bush, I could rail against forever, and I think was easily one of the 5 or 6 worst presidents of all time. But he, whether it worked or not, leave no child behind was meant to actually achieve a policy goal. He did actually support a pretty moderate immigration reform bill that ended up, of course, going nowhere. He did, push, of course, there's a huge donut hole and the problems with the Medicare Part D, but he did push a bill to try to help some senior. I mean, in other words, what I'm trying to say here, for anybody who's going to now claim that I like George W. Bush, who I absolutely loathe and think should have ended up in The Hague alongside Dick Cheney and what the hell was his name?
Rumsfeld?
Wolfenschluger,
Right.
Wolfen, I can't remember his damn name anymore. Give me his name.
Wolfowitz.
Yeah, there you go. Him, and of course, Rumsfeld and the whole group of them. So again, when people refuse to do nuance, it pisses me off. And I'm not going to even look at the chat because I'm sure somebody's in there like saying I love George W. Bush right now. No, he was terrible, a terrible, terrible president. But they
Right,
came
but
in
he at
and
least-
he had some things he wanted to make,
Right.
policy goals. This one, there aren't any policy goals except for, does it enrich me? Does it enrich me or my friends, or make me more famous or get me out of prison or, like anything like that? There's nothing that has anything to do with the United States and how he behaves.
Right. He is a bona fide oligarch president. He wants to enrich his rich friends, just like you said. He wants to amass power to further those ends. And that's literally all. He just does not care in any meaningful way about the plight of the American people.
And I wonder if the
Yep.
saving grace in all of this is there's a certain level of incompetence that seems to surround Donald Trump and all of his cronies. So, for example, the incompetence that Pete Hegseth had to put classified bombing plans on Signal Chat. I mean, Melissa, as somebody who's served, I mean, if you had put sensitive information on a publicly accessible Signal Chat, what would have happened to you?
My head almost exploded that day. I had a TS-SCI clearance and I was the crypto tech for the USS Dwight D. Eisenhower. So that meant that I received, cataloged, maintained, and then destroyed when it was used crypto materials for the ship. There's something called TPI, two-person integrity. When you have certain pieces of material that are rated top secret or above, you have to have 2 people in the room at all times with that material, even if it's so much as a thumb drive. And now I knew a young woman who really had to go to the bathroom. She was in a space with top secret material. The young man in the room with her thought it would be funny to not allow her to go because he would have to go with her, right? He would have to go with her. She put a thumb drive in her pocket and walked about 10 feet down the P-way, went to the bathroom, came back. She had that thumb drive. She got 2 years in Leavenworth.
Wow.
I mean, the expectations on the enlisted people and what we are expected, the level of integrity we are expected to maintain once we receive a security clearance and we handle classified materials is so head and shoulders above what we see elected officials and even presidents held to task for maintaining those state secrets. So it becomes more and more infuriating by the year as those the gap seems to grow wider in expectations for those on the top and those on the bottom.
And I imagine that's going to have a huge impact on morale.
Absolutely. I mean, throughout the ranks. And that's why a lot of what Pete is suggesting here is going to be very, very problematic in execution because women aren't just going to go back. Black and Hispanic people are not just going to go back. we have built careers in the military. Why would we walk away from something where we are building a career? And why would we allow ourselves to be pushed backwards? It's an incredible affront and insult to the very, very talented, hardworking men and women in the military that don't happen to be white and male.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of, reminds me similarly to what I was saying earlier about, past Republican presidents versus this one. In the military in the past, look, there's always been, the military's tried to stay apolitical, which is what you need if you want to have a democracy. But there's always been some politics, right? It's inevitable. I mean, it took Truman to desegregate the military in 48 is an example that comes to mind. Why was the military segregated? Politics, no other reason, right? I mean,
Right.
But at least it as a an organization did its best to not reflect partisan politics.
Right.
And now again, some an organization that inevitably had some politics in it, but tried not to, has been so overrun. I mean, while he was riffing up there about like the thickness of stationery paper and probably what toilets flushing again. Did he get to that one? He's a big stickler for there being enough
This
water.
one was stairs, walking downstairs.
Walking. Oh, yeah, that's right. Also, he had to walk up 14 stairs instead of an escalator at the UN, and that I think was a war crime in and of itself. That's like at least 12 days of exercise for him. And when you kind of look at the things that he had to say there. I mean, you look at any past president, again, I'm going to go to George W. Bush. I'm going to go to Obama. I'm going to go to Bill Clinton. I'm going to go to whomever. And all of them, there were times where they inappropriately, I mean, certainly mission accomplished with George W. Bush. That was incredibly inappropriate and disgusting when he said, not to mention 100% wrong. That was like, oh yeah, mission accomplished in the war's beginning now.
Yeah.
But the way Bush, the way Trump stood there and called, what did he say? He called Democrats sick and criminals, I believe.
Radical
leftist.
Radical leftist lunatics over and over and over. Yeah.
And then insulted President Obama, insulted President Biden. I don't know if he made it all the way back to Clinton. That's pushing old man's memory there a little bit far.
Yeah.
But so delegitimized in the eye, again, I'm not saying the military believed him, but I'm sure there's a couple radicalized folks in there who did, delegitimized previous presidents and said how they disrespected and hated the military, how Biden stole the election in 2020. I mean, this is the stuff of exactly what you avoid when you want to have a democracy. And so my worry again is that even with this great tradition in the military, there have to be a couple bad apples in there because there are a couple bad apples everywhere. And what signal did they just get from these guys to do? What with Venezuela? Who would need to, maybe that's the question to ask someone like you, which is who would need to be involved if we decide we're going to, because I read in one of the publications that they already have strike plans drawn up, which again, maybe is not unusual. Maybe they have that for any potential enemy way ahead of time as sort of a matter of fact, but they have that done. They've certainly been wagging the dog and, to use too many animal metaphors, poking the bear, so to speak, when they've been bombing these boats in international waters. And if you think about it, and we've talked about it, David and I in here before, Venezuela literally fits the entire checklist. If you're a completely politicized administration and all you want is to be able to win an election where you're incredibly unpopular, 39% approval rating last I saw, the economy is going into the crapper, which it's going to be. It already is, because he's done essentially everything that anybody who understands any economics would say not to do at the same time. There's the Epstein stuff. There's how much older he's looking and the purple blotches that seem to be finding friends of their own all over his body. But
a lot of that is interconnected, right? Like when you destabilize the economy, and my good friend Jolly Good Ginger just said the truth out loud the other day when someone asked him, why did you enlist? And he said, I enlisted because of poverty. And that's the raw truth for a substantial percentage of the young enlisted men and women coming in now are coming in for a paycheck and benefits, because we can no longer get that in the civilian
Right.
world. We can't get health care. We can't get a paycheck like this. So when you
So
tie
do you think he
finances to it,
destabilizes like the private sector so people have to go into the military
well,
to
I
get
don't
that
think
stuff?
it's that so much. It's to take away the option of refusing that order if your kids' diapers
Gotcha.
depend on you keeping your mouth shut and doing what you're told. So some friends and I are doing some behind the scenes work to put together mutual aid funds so that that financial aspect is taken out of the picture. If you want to act on your conscience and you don't want to not obey that unlawful order, you will have funds available to you.
Hey, before I forget, we thankfully have a Substack that reaches a pretty decent audience. Can you give me that link so that I can share it and encourage folks to give?
We don't even have a link for it yet. we
Okay.
we are
Well,
we are cranking like 24/7 getting it off the
when
ground,
you
but I
do,
definitely will when you
yeah,
do. When
I
we do,
can't
yeah.
think of many more worthy ways to spend your money than that one. So please do when you get that. But yeah, I mean that's I mean, look, is he owned by Putin? Is he owned by, Erdogan? Is he owned by? I mean, again, certainly we know the close connections. We know he fawns over Putin. We know he needs Putin financially for certain stuff. But I mean, if you're going to draw up a playbook to take a very healthy, robust economy and destroy it, I don't think it would look a lot different than this.
Right.
You create a massive labor shortage in areas like farming and cattle ranching and construction sites, hotels by going and deporting not the criminals but anybody you can find, except for that guy on the bike yesterday that made them look so stupid, which is one of my favorite things in the
I
world.
love that video.
Benny Hill music, I love it. Good job, Ice. But so now you've got a labor market that's tightened, right? And these farmers, all these folks, there's no way they're going to be able to hire people at the rates they're going to have to hire them. So
Right.
they're out of business. And as we know, look, the Great Depression didn't start with the market. It started with a real estate crash in Florida. By the way, Florida causes everything bad in the world. Everybody, as you should know by now. Methed up alligators, Ron DeSantis, you got it. But I mean, and a lot of those folks had no money then suddenly because their real estate was worth nothing. They're like, maybe we should take our money out of the market, and hence it begins. And there are obviously the tariffs and Smoot Hawley, whatever. But then you look at him and you're like, okay, so he's screwed the labor market. He's emptied out expertise from our government and fired all sorts of people there who lose their purchasing power, but also emptied out expertise, the kind of expertise at a place like, I don't know, the labor department that might help people that need to find jobs and that kind of stuff. The tariffs have been taco, Trump tariffs.
Right.
I mean, he may chicken out every time, but it causes such instability that small businesses can't hire. They don't know what to do. And they fall apart. He's also crushed the HB1 visa program. So you don't have now these high skilled workers coming in here for some of the jobs they're needed for. So those companies are relocating to places like Canada. I'm sure there's half a dozen things I've missed, but I'm just.
But isn't that the most powerful and effective way to crush any opposition in a capitalist country? Just take their money away. That's it. We literally have no social safety nets. The few that we do have, he's working as quickly as he can to dismantle them. And people who are starving can't fight back.
So you're sort of agreeing with me then, because I'm trying to say, like, I don't want to sit here and say I can say 100% it's a conspiracy, but it sure looks like one. If you were going to have a conspiracy to take a very healthy economy and systematically within 6 months to a year just fucking destroy it, it would look a lot like this.
Right.
Yeah. That's good. You have anything to say on that, David?
Well, and I mean, the other part about it is the other thing you would do is you would take away the people who are reporting accurately about the economy or about anything. And so all the independent reports and surveys, and they just got rid of the hunger survey that the USDA puts out on a regular basis. They've of course messed around with the Bureau of Labor Statistics. I mean, everything that would be sort of the fair arbiter, actual measure of what's happening in our economy and our society, they're getting rid of because they don't want people to know, and they just want people to sort of buy into whatever Donald Trump says. Melissa, a little bit of time we have left. You mentioned the people you're working with. We are working to try to help people who want to make a conscientious decision to get out of the military, whatever it is. Tell us about who the we is. Who are some of these folks? Where are you located? How do people find you?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. There's a group of us veterans and some civilians that have started a Substack called Banner and Backbone. And what we're doing is reclaiming the idea of patriotism away from that far right faction. And we keep saying we deserve patriotism too. We are patriots too. So we're reframing the idea of what it means to be patriotic in this way that has been redefined really since 9/11. And we're located on Substack.
Well, our very own Frederick Pogue is involved with that.
Frederick and Nick Perot are the founders. Right. So we are, and I have started, and this is, again, all of this is just, we're working as fast as we can, but I am starting the 1A collective. That's going to be servers that are located outside of the United States. That's going to broadcast anyone who wants to write or create content and have that hosted where it can't be disappeared.
Jeez. You're only doing a few things, it seems. Helping
few, and I got 6 kids.
Get out. I mean, I've never.
You ever sleep?
I was going to say, I've never heard of somebody doing a collection of so many important things to democracy at the same time. I mean, veterans who don't want to follow unlawful orders, people who want to keep their independent voices out there, taking back patriotism from, the wimps on the right who pretend they're patriots.
I'm just curious. Go ahead. Do any of your kids, do any of your kids want to join the military? And if they did, what would you tell them?
That's right. You got 6 kids too.
Absolutely not.
Do you have more hours in the day than the rest of us?
I do sleep less, I think. My kids are mostly older. So we have 2020, 19, 17, 16, and 6. That's another story. But the older ones, my boys absolutely wanted nothing to do with the military. And they are actually in a couple of bands. They're in punk bands and hardcore bands, and they make political music. And they are out there in our local scene getting Gen Z involved in that way, reaching them on their level, speaking to them at their level. And 2 of my sons actually just started a design company called J-Sun, and they're creating skateboard gear, skateboard decks, and apparel. And they are also going to have a line of protest signs specifically for Gen Z, like by Gen Z, for Gen Z, with messaging that may get some of those kids out into the street.
Well, that would be fantastic. And it's really good to hear that they're all involved. Excuse me. It's a shame because I would say, as somebody who knows that we've long been an imperfect nation, but there was a North Star we were trying to get towards, and often we would get there in fits and starts. That if in the past, if my boys had been the types that wanted to go into the military, I'd be worried. I love them. I wouldn't want them to do it for that reason, but would support it. And now I'm, again, when I see what Trump uses the military for, but I'll be quite honest, what George W. Bush used the military for in Iraq, I would very strongly tell them not to. And it's just sort of a shame that that's where we are, because I don't believe that a commander in chief, will sit there and agonize or a general like Eisenhower did, on June 5th, knowing what he was sending people into, but knowing that for the free world to prevail, that had to happen. I just, I don't believe we have that caliber, as you said, as they're getting further and further away, from being the people that have the honor of anybody in the military. I don't think they appreciate it, respect it, and And so
Well, there are a
that,
lot of voices that will blame young people, especially young men, for the violence in society and say video games. Oh, they play these video games like Call of Duty. No, I'm going to have to say that our actual leaders lying to us about weapons of mass destruction and sending us like we were video game characters to go die or to go mess up our mental health to such a degree that we take our own life when we return home. Don't blame video games for the actions of commanders in chief.
yeah, I mean, there you go. The PTSD afterwards, the cutting mental health services. I mean,
Yeah.
sorry, I played Fortnite with my kids. It doesn't make me any angrier.
Right.
Looking at Trump makes me angry, but
I
not
actually
you.
have to go pick up my kids from the bus stop. So I'm going to say, Melissa, thank you so much for being on. It was a pleasure meeting with you. If you guys
Thank
want to
you.
keep going. But great show as always, Cliff and Melissa. Thanks. We'll be following you. I promise.
Thanks
All
so
right,
much
thank
for being
you.
here, as
Nice to
always,
meet you.
David.
Okay.
All right, we can. Yeah, we've got about. I can definitely do about another 5 to 10 minutes. Certainly 5. Yeah, that stuff always gets me angry, right? I mean, we've been. I mean, it just reminds me of the bullshit we go through every time, which now is every day after a mass shooting, and it's just like, oh, the video games, and it's like, yes,
Right.
right.
And
They don't
two of
play. They don't
those,
play those games in Japan and Canada and the United Kingdom and France and Spain, and I mean, oh, it's the mental health. Nope, we're
right.
not an
Well,
outlier in mental health.
two of the shooters from this past weekend were found to be veterans, and they have slashed mental health care for veterans. And so I'm not going to exactly draw those correlations because I don't know if they were reaching out for mental health, but there has, you have to notice a trend that when you cut mental health services for the armed combatants of America who have been to combat and who have PTSD, and then we start seeing an uptick in gun violence.
Right. The danger with veterans. I mean, again, there have been numerous reports that have come on this from Homeland Security, others. One famously quashed that came out under Obama that Janet Napolitano put out, but it was so political because that should tell you on the right it's political to say that people that are Nazis are committing acts of violence, and disproportionately they're in the military, and that just makes sense because military folks have the training to pull it off. It doesn't
Right.
mean I mean, there's 2 unique factors there as far as I can see it. One is you have the training to do it, and 2, the higher levels of PTSD. It doesn't
Right.
mean you're saying military are dumber or military are bigger jerks, but if you're suffering already from unique forms of mental illness from your service, unique in that, not unique as you're the only one, but unique as in this group of people versus others who've never been through something like that, and you know how to use weaponry and have easy access to it, well, of course, you're going to be more of a risk than somebody that either doesn't know how to use that or hasn't been through that experience and gotten PTSD. I mean, so they tried to hide behind this attacks veterans when really it didn't. It was making a point that disproportionately among those
Right.
and disproportionately among those sadly who were there on January 6th were veterans, because again, the same deal. It doesn't mean anything except for more understanding of how to commit warfare from what they've learned. And sadly, we've learned that many forms of sort of, not all, there are a lot of, I mean, I had Graves' disease, which gave me all sorts of anxiety that can be considered a mental illness. And I don't think I'm more violent than anybody else. So I want to be clear. I'm not throwing out a stigma that anybody suffering from any mental health issues is more violent, because most are not. But I'm talking about specific forms of mental illness
Right.
that make
Well,
people more prone to violence.
Part of what stood out to me and really concerned me about Pete's speech, he continually used the word maximum lethality. And when you're talking about training people for maximum lethality while simultaneously rolling back the trainings, one of the trainings that he wants to eliminate is a training that soldiers receive when they are exiting the military, the transition training. He wants to do away with basically all the trainings. But that training in particular helps you to transition from the life of combat to the life of the civilian world. So you take away that, you cut VA mental health care, and you train these individuals. You not only train them for maximum lethality, you open them up to abuse within the ranks. So not
Right.
only are we going to see people get hurt more in the military, we're going to see people get hurt more outside the military.
Right. But I mean, it's just, again, it's as if they sat there and said, what is the stupidest, most counterproductive, most damaging things we could do, and said, here's a list of them. Okay, that's what we're going to do.
Right.
Like, again, like all science is thrown aside. And we've lost, all basis for any knowledge because they deny it exists. And then we end up doing exactly what we've learned not to do. It's like going back to putting leeches on people for a good bleeding because they've got a fever. I mean,
Right.
We're not that far from that. God, that gets me angry. And especially for people that already, what more do you have to give? You've gone and you've served your country and you've gotten PTSD and, and various other forms of mental illness because you put yourself in harm's way for a country you believed in. And now we're going to toss you to the wolves when you get back.
Right.
I mean, I don't know how to say it anyway. There's nothing more fucking sickening, honestly. Well,
And
there is something as fucking sickening, which is taking away lunches from school kids and starving them. So that's about tied. But
yeah.
but
And when you factor in the way they're criminalizing homelessness, knowing the staggering percentage of individuals who are homeless that are veterans, it's just another FU to veterans.
yes, criminalizing. I mean, I guess that's better than what Brian Kilmeade wanted to do. Who, I guess
Right,
Kilmeade was a
that's
perfect
true.
name for him, wasn't it? That how anyone has it. I mean, a guy advocated for genocide on TV. I mean,
Right, but the left
actual
is
class
inciting
of human
violence.
beings. He advocated that we kill, and he still has a job on TV.
Right.
But luckily, Jim Acosta left CNN, and Paul Krugman left the New York Times, and Aunt Karen Ataya left the Washington Post because they were all really dangerous, not Brian Kilmeade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the left is inciting violence. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Anything else you want to leave folks with here? So if there are websites, I know you said you don't have you said Banner and Backbone.
Banner and Backbone is on Substack, right?
Yes. What is do you have a exact URL I can put in here?
Banner, I'm
I can find it
look
if you don't have it. And
I'm
maybe
not sure
Fred
about theirs,
Pogue, if
but
he's
I
watching
will
right
give you
now,
mine.
can come help. Okay, you can give us yours. That's good.
Mine is counterstorymedia.substack.com. And another little project I'm doing that harkens back to my love of history and my love of writing. I love Thomas Paine and the idea of the pamphlets that were written, the Federalist Papers and Alexander Hamilton. So I've begun my own one-page pamphlet called The New Papers. That's at counterstorymedia.com/TNP for the new papers. And there's a password for the site, White Rose. So you can see the most current copy. And this is something that I literally print out and hand out everywhere. I was just in DC last week and I dropped off.
We don't do enough of that and realize that old school stuff like that, smart, like pamphleteering, even in this day and age, getting that in front of people. But when it comes to what I'm going to have to do, because you do too many good things, so that's your fault. We're going to have to just get a list of the various URLs and places that people can find, and also sort of descriptions of what they are. And then we can get that out to people, because otherwise I'm going to screw something up right now. If I try to, I'll put in one and I'll combine two of them and into the wrong thing. And so I would really love it if we could follow up after this and just get me this is all, I mean, I haven't heard you say a thing yet that you're doing where I'm like, oh, okay, well, that's helpful, kind of like every single thing is sort of essential. It is essential what you're doing. And I am, there's like all these, it always felt like if you were a buff, so to speak, you had to be a Civil War buff. There are all
Yeah.
those types out there. I'm a revolutionary buff. Like
Yeah.
I love that stuff. That is to me. So when you're talking my language, you're talking the Federalist Papers. I quote Federalist 10 a lot about factions and the damage, what James Madison knew, the damage done to society by factions,
Right.
i.e., interest groups like the NRA or even political parties, which they knew would devolve into this. They didn't want those and should have followed that. But to me, because again, it's not to deify them. A number of them owned slaves. Again, we have to always in history is being able to accept nuance and sort of, look at the times people are in and look at what was progressive, what was not, and try to come to overall conclusions. But some of the things that they were saying, like if people would understand that period more and understand the sort of founding DNA of this country, they would get how full of shit this Supreme Court is, the right. I talk about it on here a bunch about the fact that the original capital of the United States was in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
And they moved it. And one of the reasons, the big reason they moved it is because they had seen in the past, and the reason why we had an emoluments clause that Trump's ignored and things of that, they'd seen kings, certain kings and queens go into debt with foreign wars and allow themselves to be purchased by foreign countries because to get themselves out of debt, these kinds of things. So they wanted and they'd seen, aristocrats of extraordinary wealth undermine policy of countries. So they purposely wanted to be sure, or as they could be, that the financial capital and the political capital were much further away from each other. And back then, I don't know, car, airplane, internet, New York, and it wasn't just like you got together for a nice lobbyist lunch if one lived in New York and one lived in DC.
Right.
This was something they did. This is something that is recorded in history. And if you know that, you can't come to a Citizens United conclusion. You just can't, because you understand that their greatest fear, and it's everywhere, in our founding documents, was that wealthy traders, they thought that war profiteers should be put to death. It was right there, and
again, my son and I were in DC a couple weeks ago, and I've been going to DC since I was a kid, very often. And I remember DC as a kid being full of white, stuffy guys in ill-fitting suits, and they looked sort of like public servants, and something that really, really struck me as a sign of where we're at now is when I was in DC last week, I saw a Rolex store 2 blocks from the Capitol. And I was like, if that doesn't tell you something.
Yes. That's an example. Like politics has become an enormous money-making business. Uh-oh, we lost your video again. Are you still there, Melissa? Melissa, we lost you. We will give you a minute or two to come back. Oh, you're back to us. I think we got you. I hear something. Are you there? Can you hear me? I feel like you are there, but you can't hear me. Which, in the meantime, I'll say, where was Robin with that point? Yes, this was it. If you hear me, Robin, talking about this, the sort of bane of our evil right now, of our system, is what we've allowed to happen the last 40 to 50 years with a monopoly-based economy that has upended everything. Because what do you get when you get a couple people, when you get a couple companies controlling everything with no competition? which again, people understand capitalism, understand you need very much of. Well, don't have to pay your workers very well because they've got nowhere else to go. You can despoil the environment because your products are needed. We lost Melissa, I think. In any case, you can drive prices through the roof and screw your consumers. You screw everybody. Monopolies, like all monopolies are essentially our corporate communism. Everybody's like, well, communism is terrible because the government has no competition and they can just screw everything up. And my response was, yeah, there's no transparency. The government can screw everything up and charge whatever they want and offer shitty products and do all that. Guess what you can do if you're a monopoly? All the same stuff. Let me try to add her back to the stage. Are you back?
I am back. I don't know what happened.
All right. We saw you for a little bit, but like you didn't know you were here. So it was kind of cool.
Yeah.
We got to talking about a little bit about monopolies. And I was saying how, yes, that's why the founders would have like recoiled from those too, because as I just said, no Democrats never message it this way. I kind of feel like they should, considering what Republicans have made of the word communism. And the reason I oppose communism, besides the fact that it's a authoritarian system that doesn't give people personal rights, but also if the government is controlling everything economically, then it's one entity selling you, let's say it's toilet paper. There's no reason for them to create a good product because you still need them. There's no reason for them to treat their workers well because their workers have nowhere to go. There's no reason for them to worry about despoiling the environment because, again, who's going to complain? It creates all the most perverse incentives, is what monopolies do. That would be, as I was saying, a government entity. That's communism. But why is it any different if it's 1 to 5 corporations that have the same situation, that essentially have no competition, essentially have no worry about how shittily they treat their workers and their consumers and whatever, and that the founders would have been horrified by this. Why do you think we just went through what we went through with Jimmy Kimmel? Because Nexstar is trying to get approval, which they got, to build an even bigger stupid right-wing monopoly, and so they were kissing Trump's ass. It creates the other thing that monopolies create too, is a massive conflict of interest, because you can't, as I've said before, when it happened with Stephen Colbert, when he was pushed out, I think I said at the time, and I can't remember all of it, right? But it was like, okay, was he pushed out by CBS, or was he pushed out by Paramount? Or was he pushed out by Enterprise Rent-A-Car? Or was he pushed out by Lionsgate? Or was he pushed out by, like I could just keep going and listing, because there's like 50 entities in there. And again, there's clearly going to be conflicts of interest. So of course, some are going to cover for others. And if there's any news organizations in there, they're not going to report what are going on at their other. It just is, again, we had it the 30s to the 80s, when we weren't there yet socially, was the best economic period in this country, post-depression up through Ronald Reagan coming in and declaring that monopolies were more efficient, the University of Chicago school idiots, and heading us in that direction of a monopolized economy. And during that, there's a reason why from the 30s to the 80s, like, you didn't have a college degree, one salary took care of it. You got a couple weeks off. You got good benefits. Got to go to the beach. So granted, our economy changed too, from a factory-based, manufacturing-based to another. But we could have transitioned to that economy in the way that would have reflected. I mean, Western Europe has, but we haven't, because our system is so distorted by these big players. And again, that just like lobbyists having the power they have, just like Trump taking $500 million jets, and just like, brown bags of cash, and everything else is literally the opposite of everything the founders understood and wanted and wrote about in several different documents, books, formal documents, whatever.
With this regime, it's like to a cartoonish degree.
Right. It is. It's cartoon corruption. It's so ridiculous. We ran a piece by a good friend who is a terrific writer, and one of the few true journalists left out there, Brian Karam, who went to prison on at least 2 occasions to protect the anonymity of sources of his. And Brian is the real deal. And he wrote about for us how they're doing a FOIA request. He is with the James Madison Project of all places,
Oh, I love that.
on some of this, some of the stuff that Trump declared was not classified, but of course isn't releasing certain information. I don't remember vis-a-vis what it is. I don't know why it's not coming back. But point being, the DOJ comes to them and says, well, if you want it expedited, you have to give us a $50,000 bond. And there's no guarantee. In fact, I'd say it's the opposite of a guarantee that they would get that bond back, even if it was rejected. It was a payoff.
Yeah.
They were hiding a $50,000 bribe behind our legal system. Get 50,000, bring it here. We'll probably reject your what you're doing anyhow. They really seem to like the number 50,000 a lot. That Tom Homan and the rest. And I'm just saying, this is so antithetical to everything they wanted. I mean, and you can go to the period of time. I'm also admit, even though I think he was a bit too much of a, let's call it a foreign policy aggressor. I'm a huge fan of Teddy Roosevelt's and somebody else who said that we could not have a functioning economy with large trusts. They would destroy everything and had to be broken up. Well, we've understood this throughout history.
Right.
That money, what money does to our politics, and yet here we are, because we've let people rewrite what our history was, and not enough people in our populace were educated about the times, and that's the problem. But I think I am reaching the end of my ability to continue to speak in a lucid way.
Coherent manner.
Some would argue that was the age of 30 for me. So it really just depends on who you talk to. But I figured I will let you go and then just give a quick goodbye to my wonderful audience here afterwards. But normally I would ask you all the places we can find you. But again, we've been through that and we've shared some of them. And I promise you all that we will make it clear. It will be go up on my YouTube. We'll get it up on Substack. We will get it in here next week. Can toss it into the chat. But you will know if you're saying to yourself, I need to find myself some Melissa Corrigan for A, B, C, or D, you will find yourself some Melissa Corrigan, because I've learned this past hour that we all need Melissa Corrigan. So seriously, I mean, I'm always a little, and I don't want people to ever take me the wrong way. I'm always a little facetious about things. At the same time, I'm being serious. Like, you're incredible. What you're doing is incredible. So please don't take the fact that I say things in a goofy way as anything less than an enormous respect for everything you're doing. It's
Well, my teachers in elementary school would write on my report card that I talk too much. So I was made for this moment. It's okay. And I always like to leave people with a call to action. And my favorite call to action, because it's just so dang easy, is 5calls.org. You go to that website, type in your zip code, and they're going to give you the direct phone numbers to your representative, congressmen, senators. You call them today. Pick a topic. There's so many to choose from. Pick a topic and yabber their ear off about it for a minute. My representative responds to me now, hello again, Miss Corrigan. So we should
always do that.
We should all be on such close terms with the people who we pay to work for us.
We should. We absolutely should. I'll say quickly, because I want to argue in favor of the point you made, that I remember did pretty good, overall my grades are pretty good in the up through the 8th grade when they had the E, like the earlier system before we got the A's and the B's, right? Where it was like excellent and very good and whatever. But I used to always get a U in classroom behavior because I was the one sitting in the back that would like throw an eraser at my friend's head and stuff like that. Turns out I have ADHD. Who knew?
Yeah.
They certainly didn't in the late 70s. I didn't know what the hell that was called.
Right.
They're like, he seems like an overactive child. But I'm making the argument for those of us who talk too much and misbehave. Perhaps maybe in the future, there's some value to that. Maybe we don't just listen to authority blindly and maybe, we question things and think of other creative things and stand
Right.
up to it.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't have it any other way. Hey, you're awesome. I'm so glad that Fred and Lawrence and the gang introduced me to you and got you on the show today. We will do everything we can to promote all the wonderful things you're doing. And
Awesome.
please keep on fighting the fight, because we need you on our side.
All right. I appreciate it so much, Cliff. Thank you so much.
It is absolutely my pleasure, Melissa. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, you all. This is a particularly long one. Wow. Look at how much time. So I can't spend too much more time here. Bills to pay and things to write. But I wanted a few programming notes. First of all, thank you for being here. I see Robin. Robin, I keep seeing you in the chat now that you said I never look at the chat. Something about John Thune, and I didn't see what that was, but okay. What did I want to say? I wanted to say thank you as always. You guys have been hugely supportive. I wanted to say thank the folks. We have Triva, who is a new member, and New Vets Forever, who's a new member. We should highlight you on the screen. Yay, new YouTube member, and yay, another new YouTube member, which means you are supporting our work, and you guys are fantastic, and I thank you for it. Otherwise, we have a live tomorrow, our Substack only, Amped Up with Cliff Schechter live. Me and David Schuster again. Tomorrow we have on the wily, the crafty, and actually somebody I'm excited to talk to tomorrow, because he does not hold back on shit. Joe Walsh, who was our inaugural guest on our first Amped Up when we first started that regular show on Substack about 4 months ago. I don't remember, 5 months ago. So Joe Walsh will be joining us because he's obviously a former member of Congress, and we want to hear his thoughts on the shutdown and how ridiculous Republicans are, but how Democrats are doing their usual thing and not putting together any kind of a cohesive message and being on offense about it. And it drives me insane. This stuff is not that difficult. It is not that fucking difficult. You can do it. Just pick the 2 or 3 key message points and fucking hammer them home everywhere, on TV, on digital, in press conferences, in columns. I don't understand why this is so hard. It is marketing 101. It is the easiest thing in the world. And we've lost so many battles to Republicans because we don't do it still for some reason. It's a story. Everything's a story, which is why I loved what Melissa said she was doing there. We told stories, I've said this before, around, campfires for 10,000 years before there were internets and things. That's how humans communicated, through stories. That's how comic books came to be. There's a good guy, there's a bad guy, and the bad guy is hurting you somehow. The good guy is stepping up to help you and solve that problem. And you need to tell people who the good guy is, who the bad guy is who's hurting you, how they're hurting you, how the good guy is standing up and helping you, and then why you should support them because of that. This is not difficult. If you just throw out like Obamacare subsidies on its own, toss it out, and that's the only thing you're saying, and you're not saying very specifically, here's who created them for you to begin with. Here's who tried to vote against them 4 billion times. Here's who's coming after them again while they're buying more yachts and buying, all the little special extra homes and wonderful couture outfits of theirs, which I'm sure Peter Thiel has many. And here's what they're doing to you to help billionaires while they're taking food out of your children's stomachs, while they're taking your schooling away from your kids, while they're taking away your health care. Tell the whole goddamn story instead of a piece of it, without who's to blame for what's happening and who's trying to help you. This isn't that hard. It drives me insane though. We'll be on to talk about that. Cannabis helps ADHD from Amethyst Pony. It does. Dummies are legal here. Let's just say that. Jim, of course, Republicans can't and won't negotiate in good faith. And that's been true for the better part of 20 years now, with a few exceptions in between. you can tell when they want to negotiate in good faith because when it benefits them, like Joe Biden brilliantly got them to negotiate the infrastructure bill, because I can tell you that story. I live right here in Cincinnati. House Speaker was John Boehner from not too far from Cincinnati. Senate Leader was Mitch McConnell from right across the bridge in northern Kentucky. And there are two bridges that literally were structurally unsound. A big chunk of one of them fell into the fucking Ohio River. So they wanted money from the federal government to fix those bridges, as did others in leadership, and they got it done. He knew it was in their best interest. In that case, you get together with them. But most of the time, they are not there in good faith. They will never be there in good faith. And it's just, at some point, you have to ask yourself, you can't be this stupid. So what game are you playing? So we'll talk more about that tomorrow with Joe. I'm sure he'll curse as much as me, which will be impressive. And now, as you know, before we leave, we have our tradition. I don't want to do my Jerry Maguire and ask who's coming with me, but we need to leave on a positive note. And a positive note says supporting everything that we do here, in bringing you great people like Melissa and bringing you David Schuster, in my being here and doing this, in the platforms we've created and the fights we're fighting. And all I ask of you is that we hit the number 5 in terms of what folks are willing to support us with. We have 2 new members. Otherwise, anyone who is willing to give us a super sticker for 99 cents, a super chat for $1.99, like literally that's what we're talking about. It's a good feeling thing. It's a we're all in this together thing. And there is Sheldon Hughes, as always, with the $2 super chat. Sheldon, you're awesome. Thank you. That is what I'm talking about, guys. Again, this shouldn't be like pulling teeth. I don't want you to give away the money that you need for your family or for anything else. But that's why I say to you, if you've got more, terrific. Mike McAndrews gave us $500 one time in here, and I almost fainted. That doesn't happen most of the time. I think the most anybody else has ever given is 50, and most of the time it's below 10. And there we go. Look at Lefty Gramps. Lefty Gramps is awesome. This has been, and we started late today, sort of, because I don't know why StreamYard has been glitching, but it has been. And this time it is not my fault. All the external things are working here. Sorry I was late. Don't ever be sorry for being late. $4.99 Lefty Gramps, you are the man. And Robin Dopp, who doubted me, thought I never looked into I do have a challenge looking in there, because if there's no guest on, we're great. But I don't want guests to think I'm ignoring them when I'm asking them questions. And I look away. That kind of feels like a dick move. So it's not that I'm not trying to see everything you guys are saying. Maybe we'll add an extra live stream here and there where I just come on if you guys want, and you ask questions. We are going to, for our paid Substackers, and I've told you all before, if you come to this live chat and reach out to me, I would almost guarantee you that I would cut what your paid Substack would be by about 50%. David Schuster and I are going to start doing a Friday question and answer where you can ask us anything. The time Kellyanne Conway threatened me after a debate on TV, David can tell you about his run-ins with people. I had run-ins with all sorts of people you'll love to hear about. We'll share some fun and interesting stuff. It's going to be a Friday feature and only for paid subscribers on Substack. But again, if you're somebody who's here regularly, I will find a way to make it work for you. We will very much discount you getting in. Oh, you're kidding about the chat? Okay, Robin. Well, hey, I wasn't offended. I just wanted to make sure you knew that I do look at the chat. Yeah, this start thing isn't even telling me all of the new stuff. And that's frustrating me, because I saw that we also had somebody else who was kind enough. There we are, Petrazi. I'm trying to click on it. Gave a super sticker for $5. Thank you so much, all of you. There you go. You got us to what I asked for 5 various things. You got us to 6. You have surpassed what I asked for. And now Carl Jacobson comes in with a $10 super sticker. Wow. Thank you so much, Carl. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. So tomorrow, 2 p.m. Eastern with Joe Walsh on Substack. That's another thing. If you come watch no matter what, if you're a paid subscriber, you can comment, you can watch either way. And again, if you're the folks like who are here regularly, search me out. I've put my cs@bluemapaction.com email on there before. If you want to become a paid subscriber, but don't want to pay full freight, I think we've got a 20% sale right now, so already, but I will further discount that for all of you. We just need to talk. This is a bazaar, right? We can go back and forth. No, I mean, seriously, I want as many people to be a part of it as can be. So we need to pay the bills, but I want people to be there. Reach out, let me know. You are all amazing. I can't believe I got 9 overall. Did I miss something? Mr. Android, $2.22. 2 angel kisses. Melissa was worth it. There you go. 9, folks. I only asked for 5 different gifts, and you gave me 9. You are outstanding. And I have nothing left intelligent or semi-intelligent to say. And that's assuming I said intelligent things earlier. So I will finish up in my traditional fashion. You guys have been great. Thank you for being here. I hope to see most of you tomorrow. And as the sun sets slowly in the west, I bid you a fond farewell. I think I do, unless it doesn't feel like playing. Let's try again. As the sun sets slowly in the west, I bid you a fond farewell. Worked. No, it didn't work.